Namaskar, hello and a very warm welcome viewers. You're watching this special edition of Sansad TV. The global economy continues to reel under the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. India is no exception. The enormous disruption has thrown up the challenge to create new avenues of growth while rejuvenating existing ones. The nation's broad range of fiscal, monetary and health responses to the crisis, coupled with deeper economic reforms, have supported recovery. So much so that if 2020 was the year when COVID flattened India, 2021 is when India's economy recovered from the shock. In this special report, we'll analyze how this year's budget could speed up this healing for the economy. Come along. The COVID-19 pandemic has unsettled global trade and commerce. The GDP, consumption, job creation, and new investments have all been hit. In India, much needed constraints like lockdowns to check the pandemic disrupted economic activity, employment, business, trade, manufacturing, and services activities across the country. Through its Atmanirbhar Bharat initiative, the government proposed many fiscal measures to encourage growth and economic self-reliance. Its essence is in the drive to transform India into an economy that can offer the world a calibrated approach to the pandemic crisis. Atmanirbhar Bharat has gone beyond government policy to become a national movement for self-reliance. In 2020, for 3 months, after a nationwide lockdown was imposed to check the spread of the virus, almost all economic activity in India came to a standstill. On 12th May 2020, Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced a special economic package of 20 lakh crore rupees, equal to 10% of India's GDP. The aim was to firmly establish the nation in the global supply chain while empowering poor people, laborers and migrants. The Prime Minister's call to turn the trials brought by the pandemic into opportunities to make the nation self-reliant struck a chord among the people.
आपदा को अवसर में बदलने की भारत की ये दृष्टि आत्मनिर्भर भारत के हमारे संकल्प के लिए उतनी ही प्रभावी सिद्ध होने वाली है। हमारी सप्लाई चेन, हमारी आपूर्ति की उस व्यवस्था को हम मजबूत करेंगे जिसमें मेरे देश की मिट्टी की महक हो, हमारे मजदूरों के पसीने की खुशबू हो।
The Indian economy looked well set to tread on the recovery path in early 2021 till a grueling second wave of the pandemic threw it off track once again. Faced with surging infections, India mounted a calibrated and dynamic response. Slightly looser pandemic curbs were enforced to enable more economic activity compared to the 2020 total lockdown. To soften the blow of the second wave of the pandemic and revive businesses, the government unrolled active economic measures along with a robust vaccination strategy. A relief package of 1.1 lakh crore energized some of the affected sectors like travel, hospitality and automobiles. 50,000 crore was earmarked to upscale medical infrastructure in underserved regions. Vaccination efforts were liberalized to allow states, private hospitals and industry establishments procure doses directly from the manufacturers. Several structural reforms were announced, including a change in the definition of MSMEs, new PSU policy, commercialization of coal mining, higher FDI limits in defense and space sector, development of industrial land, land bank and industrial information system, production-linked incentive schemes, revamp of viability gap funding scheme for social infrastructure, new power tariff policy and incentivizing states to undertake sectoral reforms. Various steps were taken to boost consumption. They included cash payment in lieu of the leave travel concession scheme and a one-time special festival advance of 10,000 rupees for for central government employees. There were other steps like the interest-free 50-year loan to states, additional capital expenditure budget for the central government, the Emergency Credit Line Guarantee Scheme 2.0, a 1.46 lakh crore rupee boost for manufacturing through production-linked incentives for 10 champion sectors, 18,000 crore additional outlay for the PM Awas Yojana Urban. There was also the equity infusion in National Investment and Infrastructure Fund debt platform, a demand booster for residential real estate income tax relief for developers and home buyers. A project export, capital and industrial stimulus was also initiated to accelerate economic growth.
The fact that the rebound factor which has taken place in the Indian economy in the last one year or so after the first wave of COVID has been fairly strong as precedent again any other economy which has been on the outfall of fiscal stimulus by various economies, whereas in India, the government of India has been able to keep the fiscal policy very much under control. And I think this is commendable to induce that kind of growth without doing an excessive fiscal spending, which had been the demand of the market or even the opposition to a great extent. When most economies are suffering and do not have money to flush their own economies, whereas we were receiving a large chunk of money into foreign direct investment.
While presenting the first ever digital union budget last year, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman stated that India's fight against COVID-19 continues into 2021. She called this moment in history when political, economic and strategic relations in the post-COVID world are changing. The dawn of a new era, one in which India is well poised to be truly the land of promise and the land of hope. Budget 2021 saw large-scale reforms. Coming in the middle of the pandemic, the first budget of the new decade was focused at propelling India towards being Atmanirbhar. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman said the budget proposals for 2021-2022 rest on 6 pillars.
The budget proposals for 21-22 rest on 6 pillars: health and well-being, physical and financial capital and infrastructure, inclusive development for aspirational India, reinvigorating human capital, innovation and R&D, and as 6th, minimum government and maximum governance.
Initiatives to improve health and well-being included a robust outlay for health and well-being, focus on strengthening 3 areas: preventive, curative and well-being, 35,000 crore for COVID-19 vaccine, 17 new public health units and strengthening 33 existing public health units, integrated public health labs in all districts and 3,382 block public health units in 11 states, critical care hospital blocks in 602 districts and 12 central institutions.
Government of India has launched largest healthcare insurance scheme that is fully contributed by government in India, that is Ayushman or PMJY. And because of this scheme, the insurance penetration gone up to 40% from 19% only. Government of India has also supported through different banks for the easy funding, low interest rate, moratorium for establishing hospitals, nursing homes, diagnostic centers, oxygen plants. And because of this, most of the hospitals, they were verge of closing, they were revived.
On the revenue side, the government made an important choice not to impose significant new taxes or cess, and instead improve tax administration and collection, trusting that revenues will pick up once the economy moves towards normalcy. And that resulted in a robust tax mop-up. In line with broader economic trends, central tax revenues have grown at a brisk pace. At the aggregate level, its gross tax revenue in the first 7 months, April to October 2021, were up 56% over the same period last year. Direct tax revenues are up around 24% from their pre-pandemic level with robust growth in both corporate and income tax collections. Indirect taxes witnessed a healthy growth, with brisk growth across customs, excise collections, and GST revenues. Direct tax collections for 2021-2022, as on 16th December 2021, were at 9,45,276.6 crore, compared to 5,87,702.9 crore in financial year 2020-2021, representing a growth of 60.8%. Corporation tax of over 5.1 lakh crore accounted for 54%. The remaining 4.3 lakh crore was an account of personal income tax. Goods and services tax collections jumped to over 1.31 lakh crore in November, the second highest since its implementation in July 2017, in line with the economic recovery. A fresh approach to increase private sector participation while ensuring greater accountability of the public sector was envisaged. It included crucial announcements like monetization of assets of railways, airports, and other assets under the National Monetization Plan. Critical steps were announced for a better financial services market that focuses on openness and indicates India's readiness to welcome big global players. The reforms extended to the assimilation of 44 union labour laws into 4 codes to facilitate easier compliance. Old and outdated laws were eliminated to support one of the most competitive corporate tax rates in the world. 48 sections of the Companies Act were decriminalized with a view to make India the preferred investment destination. These measures resulted in record-breaking FDI investments this year. FDI inflows increased to $81.72 billion in 2020-2021, the highest ever in India's history. A key element of the government's response strategy is the focus on capital expenditure. Once lockdowns were eased, the expenditure policy was geared towards higher capital spending. Capital spending is linked with investment or development spending, where expenditure benefits extend many years into the future. Capital expenditure through asset creation increases productivity. It avoids large-scale fiscal spending that could be inflationary. The government budgeted 5.54 lakh crore in capex, a 34.5% increase year-on-year in 2021-2022. At a time when the monetary policy is focusing on interest rate cuts and liquidity infusion, a rise in demand-driven inflation could have complicated the situation. However, the Reserve Bank of India didn't raise interest rates, primarily because inflation was due to supply-side disruptions that can't be addressed by higher rates. The RBI's combination of low interest rates with conventional and unconventional monetary policy instruments managed the government's borrowing program at an average interest cost of 5.79%, the lowest since 2004-2005. This economic revival approach worked better than the strategy of pushing through large-scale packages and printing money and ending up with demand-fueled inflation, unsustainable deficits and debt.
The fiscal deficit has jumped from 3.9% in 1920 to around 9% in the year 2021. But that is to be expected because with a big crisis like this, the Indian government had to spend to come out of it. But it must be said that compared to the other developed countries, India's government expenditure was much less because India realized that there were supply shocks in the economy and that just boosting demand through fiscal expenditure was not the best way out. And in retrospect, that was a wise decision. So India did come up with the Atmanirbhar package of about $20 trillion, about 10% of the GDP.
The priorities of the Modi government in its push for economic revival are quite clear in the manner in which it has breathed new life into India's biggest employment generation sector of MSMEs. Converted into an opportunity, the COVID-19 crisis could prove to be a defining moment for this sector. The MSME sector generates over 11 crore jobs. It employs 45% of India's total industrial workforce accounts for 45% of India's total exports. 95% of all industrial units of the country are in India's sunshine sector. The government estimates it could contribute 50% to the GDP in the next 5 years. One of the biggest moves of the government was to change the definition of MSMEs, revising its investment criteria upwards and making turnover as a point of identification. It has also removed the distinction between manufacturing and the service sector, assuring the growing MSME sector access to the benefits available under the earlier definition. MSMEs with the potential to expand found this a win-win situation. Given that self-reliance is the biggest theme of Prime Minister's vision of post-COVID India, disallowing global tenders in the government procurement up to 200 crore caused little surprise. It was a critical step for Indian MSMEs in becoming globally competitive. By opening up the field exclusively to Indian MSMEs, the government is walking the talk on being vocal for local. It is providing opportunities for Indian MSMEs to grow, become confident and venture into global markets.
The government of India has taken initiative, especially Minister of MSME, Minister of Commerce and Industry and Power Industry, and especially the Labour Ministry, to provide a handholding to the MSME sector during this pandemic to revive, survive and expand their business activity. I'm sure that a lot of SMEs in India, they have utilized this facilities and the support given by the government. Special thanks to the government for the announcement of 3 lakh crore the emergency loan, which was the perfect financial fuel for the SME sector.
The countdown to Budget 2022 sees the government with an uphill task to fuel economic growth amid the resurfacing of COVID concerns. The start of the new year finds the COVID-19 far from being over. With the news and the headlines all about the Omicron variant, all eyes on the shape and the form that the economic vaccine will take in the union budget. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman concluded pre-budget meetings for Budget 2022-23 with different stakeholders in December. Over 8 meetings were held in virtual mode from 15 to 22nd December 2021. The Finance Minister also met over 120 invitees representing 7 stakeholder groups. They came at a time when India's GDP growth bounced back to a growth of 7.4% in Q2 of FY21 to 8.4% in the second quarter of the current fiscal. In the stock market, investors have seen strong gains this year, with the Nifty rallying 22% year to date and Sensex has given 20% returns so far. New companies are more confident of raising money from the stock market. The year saw 60 public issues. Ahead of the Union Budget 2022-23, industry bodies advised the Finance Minister to continue the thrust on public investment in infrastructure and capital expenditure for sustained economic recovery. With the vaccination drive all set to continue in the next fiscal year, the centre will need to enhance its budget allocation for the COVID-19 vaccination program.
The hope is that all things remaining a bit more under control, one could look at even a 10% real GDP growth. The good thing is that the government has ensured that there are no widespread lockdowns in face of the COVID-19 threats that seem to be cropping up from time to time, and there has been a very calibrated response which has helped the economy keep an even keel. Coming to the expectations for the budget, I think from my side the major expectation would be to ensure that we do the best possible and to do the maximum possible on investment into the national infrastructure pipeline of 100 lakh crores.
The last 7 years of the Narendra Modi government have seen an underlying theme driving India's economic policy: achieving growth that is transformative, sustainable, healthy and equitable, the results of which reach the poorest of the poor. These 7 years saw the government keep a tight lid on inflation and introduce landmark reforms like reduced corporate taxes, insolvency and bankruptcy code, and a large-scale paring down of the Companies Act. Policy frameworks have been revamped for transformative economic growth. Instead of working in silos, real-time linkages between sectors were implemented. Economic growth has been made broad-based. It has helped people have more surplus income, while the poorest saw a better delivery of basics like housing, sanitation, electricity connections, collateral-free bank loans, for entrepreneurship and road connectivity. In an ordinary recession, the role of policy is to set up aggregate demand and raise output consistent with full employment of resources. But the policy response during a pandemic-induced recession depends on the public health situation. India's economy is trying to shake off the shackles of pandemic. As the spread of the Omicron variant fuels uncertainty over continued economic recovery, Budget 2022-23 will hold the key for the roadmap to sustain recovery and growth. But that's all we had for you in this edition. Thanks for watching. Stay safe and stay tuned to Sansad TV. Namaskar.